Good evening, welcome to the session, the first session of this year's GDPI WAT season. The idea in this session, the overall idea what I thought would be of interest to you is to identify the broader themes which are which we are witnessing right now in the world and across India, which you must prepare on so that you can have a really constructive conversation during your interview. Again, at the very outset, if you want broader tips on how to prepare for your interview or GD or essay, on YouTube you will find another video which I had taken the last year, which is still relevant for this year too. So in this video, I will be touching upon the burning issues in the world right now. And when I say burning issues, I'm not just talking about current events. I'm talking about the overall trends which define the world that we live in right now. That's the objective, because understand something very clearly. The best interview is the one in which you have a constructive 5 minutes of exchange on a topic of mutual interest, which the panel likes and which you also like. That is the overall idea of a good interview. And again, at the cost of repeating myself, giving 10 good answers to 10 different kinds of questions in 10 different ways is not something which probably helps you stand out. So you should be aware about the different topics, prepare well, and have a conversation during the interview. So this is about the current affairs themes of this year. And ultimately you have to stand out. There are people sitting there out there nervously. I think you will find 5 out of 8 people actually browsing Knappily. Every year people tell me this happens. How do you stand out among those people? And my general tip always is, let's say you have appeared for an interview, 5 more people have appeared for the interview on that day. How does the panel remember you? You are the guy or you are the girl who complete the sentence. If there is no theme associated with your story, then it's difficult to ascribe your personality to something, and that's very important, because eventually this is the assessment of your personality. And one aspect which always stands out is your knowledge of current events and understanding of the overarching trends of the economy and the polity and the overall let's say the socio-political structure of the world that we live in. And that of course I can't cover in this session, but my idea is to give you an overview of what's currently going on and what you should expect as you move forward there. So basically there are just 2 objectives of the session. One is to make you aware of the topics you must prepare about, and as I will tell you towards the end, in my very short and very, I would say, ineffective sales pitch at the end of this, I will tell you about the modules that we offer. So that's the first objective. The second objective I will tell you later towards this session. So let's begin with the stage 2, which has officially begun. And I must tell you, do not worry about the calls that you have not got. Everybody has some regret at this stage, and that is all right. You finally go to West 1 business school and you do well there, hopefully. The fundamental problem right now is, when you are worried about calls, is that you most likely do not know your calling. So right now it's just about calls. I got this call, and how do I convert the call? Eventually life will become about your calling. If you know your calling, I would say you will stand out in your interview. This is what I want to do in life. The MBA helps me in that, and even without the MBA I will anyway do that, right? So let's now focus on the topics that I would touch upon. As you would understand, these topics are, they can, especially if I talk, each of them may take 4 to 5 hours to do justice on. But I will do reasonable justice to these topics. In my opinion, these are the topics one would already be aware of if you have been even cursorily, casually following the world events and the events in India. You would know that these are the things which define the world right now. Now the first is, of course, Indian economy. Understand you are going to an Indian business school. In whichever business school you go to will place you as a very small part of the broader Indian economy. So you need to be aware of what's going on. there. Second topic I believe is very important is the rise of inequality in India. Inequality does not merely exist; it has been increasing in India in recent years, and we need to understand why. At least we need to have certain facts and figures on that. Indian elections are coming. I have already exited all the WhatsApp groups where the morning begins with Modi ji and Rahul ji, which has become beyond tolerable to me. So, in a very non-political, apolitical manner, I have exited those groups. You can exit the groups, but you cannot obviously escape the question. The inevitable, I would say, the icebreaker question this year would be: so, who do you think is going to win? And that's sort of a trap. You should be aware of what not to say in those answers. I will touch upon that, and of course, Trump. This world is about Trump. Ever since he has won, the political structures have revolved around him. There are many leaders who have been inspired by him, and they have achieved massive results. We know the recent case in Brazil. You have the president who is more Trump than Trump. He's called the Trump of the tropics, Jair Bolsonaro. Within a year, he came out of nowhere and he won the election. So Trump is a model more than a person, which has been emulated across the world, and he has disrupted the world economy. It's difficult to be a human and not be impacted by something that Trump has done over the last 3 years. Brexit has been important ever since the British decided to embarrass themselves in 2016, but in 2019 it's more so because the deadline is in March, and this will also be around the time when you'll be appearing for your interviews. So a lot of buzz around Brexit would ensure that you have to be would inspire you to be prepared on the topics related to Brexit. Far right is a movement which has always existed, but right now gaining a lot of ground in Europe, and it seems like the time is just right for the far right to capture the world, and we will see how this is impacting the politics of the world. And then finally we have fake news. Whatever I said just now could very well have been fake news. You just have no way to know, right? So the point is, now fake news is something which decides elections and which decides the fate of many businesses. It is an existential crisis for Facebook, and it's something which, if we call it a problem, it's only going to get worse in the coming years. There is no solution to fake news, but yeah, we know there's a lot of, like Trump would say, fake news exists, and the beautiful part about fake news is the strongest opponents of fake news are the ones who promote fake news. So we'll come to the more interesting parts towards the later stage of the session. Now let's get to the nitty-gritties of India's economy. And now in your mind probably you would want to answer the question, how is the Indian economy doing? Is it doing good? Is it doing bad? Or just to be on the safe side, you would say it's doing good, but it could have done better. Now you could argue on either side, so long as you have relevant data. So economy being my favorite topic, my area of interest, and economy unfortunately plays servant to the polity of the country, which in 2019 we will see happen in India. But eventually economy dominates. The demands of economics cannot be ignored for long. And now, so 2019 in India is the year when economics and politics will fight each other out, and we will see who wins the battle. So what are the numbers on India's economy? It's difficult to not say that Indian economy is doing well, because if we talk about the broader numbers, first of all, the GDP growth rate, the one sentence which is inevitable when you find any news article in a foreign publication on India's economy is that India is the fastest growing major economy of the world, and that matters. So in 2018-19, the World Bank has recently predicted India's growth rate would be around 7.3%. It may be 7.2, 7.4, doesn't matter, but above 7% growth rate in this world, let us say depressing world say scenario, is quite impressive. And uh, the other fact which inevitably comes up is comparison with China. On in the module, you will find an entire session on India-China comparison. And now, I think in India we overdo comparisons with China. The point is that China is a far bigger economy than India. So if a much bigger economy grows at 6.9%, or this year 6.5%, it is all right. I think it's still doing well. The point that we forget about China is that it achieved a phenomenal run of good economic growth for more than 3 decades. And now India, let's say the good times for India's economy started in 1991. After 25 years, India's economy seems to be struggling somewhat. It's not growing at the rate at which it was 3 4 years ago. So the question is, where does it go from here? Two major disruptions to India's economy, of course, were the goods and services tax and demonetization. Majorly debatable topics, especially demonetization. Of course, politically, it has been disastrous for the government. Uh, uh, Ideologically, philosophically, uh, it can be argued that it was a good move, as in. Without taking political sides, what demonetization obviously has done is, uh, people now are aware that they cannot hold cash for a long time. So it has sent that signal that we are coming for your cash. You do not want to go through the hassle of uh, again going through some back route, backdoor entry, and formalizing your black money. So that signal has been sent. Aside from that, the biggest harm of demonetization has been, in a NAP or Knappily, you would have, if you are regular with it, you would have read the fundamental mistake of the government was to confuse a cash based economy with black money. So the small traders deal with cash, they survive on cash, and they pay in cash, they pay salaries in cash. So when they were unable to do so for close to a year, the economy suffered too. The details, of course, cannot be covered in one session, but the overall demonetization as a political experiment has failed. As an economic experiment, we have to look into the income tax collection data, where we have seen some improvements. As in, people, there are more enrollments in the income tax bracket. So in that sense, it is all right. Goods and services tax, a huge uh, experiment which has shown mixed results. The fundamental problem here was that this was not the GST that was initially envisaged, which means it had to be one nation, one tax. But there are so many tax brackets right now that there was a lot of time spent on what is the revenue neutral rate. The tax brackets were, randomly assigned. Um, I was talking to a friend of mine who runs a gym, and he was complaining that the government on the one hand says fit India and everybody should be fit, and on the other hand gym is considered a luxury item. So if you go to a gym, you have to pay 18% GST. So he said it doesn't add up. So the problem with GST was, of course, the categorization of goods and services in the categories, tax brackets. It seemed random and in many cases politically motivated, in the sense that the ruling government thought these items are mostly through for our vote bank, so therefore we do not want to trouble them. And finally, what we are seeing is what was always feared, that commit the elections, the rates will fall. So the government is now slashing rates, and we will see we'll see more reductions here. Now, the good thing about the GST is it has constitutional backing. So it's not an experiment that can be reversed if the next government comes in. It's not the same as the current government. So the experiment will continue. We'll have to learn and evolve along the way. Now, one big part of the problem is it's cumbersome. So A trader is now facing unnecessary burden of understanding the various requirements, filing online returns. But we are seeing the current government taking steps to remedy that, as in the upper limits have been increased. So, especially because of the elections, but it's an experiment which will go, and the conclusion about GST right now is the results are mixed. Compliance is a huge issue, so there is not a lot of compliance. In fact, it's deteriorating as we move forward, and now that's a bad thing. So yeah, so now another part is how will the economy be doing in the current year 2019. The first half will be phenomenal, simply because it's an election year. Understand something or remember something, or if you were not aware around that time, India survived the global economic depression in 2008-9. Uh, there were many reasons for that. One reason, of course, was that India was not really integrated with the world economy. Only 25% of the GDP was through exports. The rest was not dependent on the outside world. But another big, let's say, blessing in disguise was that it was an election year. And in an election year, miraculously, the economy starts doing well. And that is one sign that there is a lot of black money out there in the economy which starts floating during this time. So people get more cash and people spend more cash, and demand, the consumption demand, that grows, which gives a good boost to the economy. So the first half will do well, the second half will depend upon the government which is in power. Now another good thing is inflation is low. Right now it's at 3%. I was reading somewhere that in the last 30 months, if we take the average of the last 30 months, overall retail inflation is 3.9%. And 3.9% is phenomenal, because the RBI's target, the target of the Monetary Policy Committee, the 6-member body which decides these rates, interest rates of the economy, is 4%. It's 4 plus minus 2%. So if over the last 30 months it's 3.9%, it's on the dot. And now that matters a lot, because the government and the RBI, if you have followed the news in the last couple of months, were not at good terms. The current governor may probably be at better terms than the previous government, Governor Urjit Patel. But the fundamental problem, the conflict between the government and the RBI, the government of India and the RBI, is the same as the conflict between Donald Trump and the Federal Reserve. The government would always want lower interest rates, but the central bank, has to ensure that lower interest rates do not disrupt the economy by increasing the inflation rates. So lower inflation rates, interest rates are only possible when the inflation is under control, and that is something which is, let us say that it is all right if the government and the central bank are against each other, because by design they have to be so. Now inflation is less than 3%. Let's say I ask you, is it good or bad? I'm taking your interview. Is it good or bad? What would be your answer? Inflation is less than 3% right now. Let's say 2.6% is the inflation rate. Is it good or bad? Your answer should be, it depends, right? Why should it be it depends? Because there are two parts of the economy. One is the consumer, the other is the supplier. Now it's good for you as a consumer, but it's bad for the supplier. And we also have to look into what is driving these lower interest rates. Now if we are talking about retail inflation, close to 50% is articles of primary consumption, mostly food. So if overall inflation is coming down, it's mostly because food inflation is coming down. And the next big component, of course, is crude oil, which also recently is not wreaking havoc on the economy, but it's mostly food prices coming down. And now that should worry us rather than make us happy. Why would food prices be plunging? It should worry us, it should worry the government even more, because that clearly means that the farmers are not getting the prices they deserve. In fact, onion prices have been falling for a year now. It has negative growth rate, the prices. This itself in itself is an indicator of the depressed conditions that the farmers of India face, because the cost does not change and the price, it falls. There's no way out of this trap. So, and we'll see what are the ways out. But again, agriculture in India is a separate session in itself. Now, one interesting part is inflationary expectations are high. As per the latest RBI survey, what the Reserve Bank of India does it asks a sample of respondents about what do they expect the inflation rate to be in the near future. Now that is trending at 10%, which means most people expect the inflation to rise in the coming months, and it is important. The RBI does not only look at the current inflation, it also looks at inflationary expectations, because when you expect inflation to be high, the inflation rate actually becomes higher than what it is, because your behavior adjusts to that. So if you expect, let's say, housing prices to go up significantly by 10% in the next 1 year, what you would do is you will buy the house right now, and what that will do is it will increase the price of house. Rather than a year from now, it will increase it by around 10% right now. So the question is, why is it that people are expecting higher prices? One, of course, is that these are the times are not good. So in general, people are not optimistic. It's one reflection of that. If people are expecting prices to go high without much rational data about it, it simply means that people do not have high hopes from the economy, and more importantly from the government. Again, a bad sign for the government as it heads into the election season. One big reform which has worked for the economy is the insolvency and bankruptcy code. What this has done is, to some extent, it has solved the problem of non-performing assets. What this law has done is, it has provided a clear path, timeline, and the rules of the game of declaring a company insolvent and conducting auctions of the remaining property, and let us say dividing the spoils among the stakeholders, including a very well organized structure of appeals. So it has led to really good case studies of success. The interesting part here is that 32,000 crores of rupees, I think that is the amount which has been recovered as a result of the IBC. So a good reform. So if you have to talk about, let's say, one good reform for the Indian economy passed by the government in the last few years, then it has to be the insolvency and bankruptcy code. Not that the problem has been solved. The problem is so huge, and let us say of not just the current government's own making. It has accumulated over the years, but this is one way forward there. So these are the good parts. I'm just taking a few pointers here. There are many good parts, as there are many not so good parts. Now, first of all, what's not so good for the Indian economy is that the global conditions are not of its liking. Crude oil prices right now under control, but they have been fluctuating a lot in the last few months, and if the crude oil prices go up significantly in the let's say the months leading to the election, which is the next 2-3 months, what will inevitably happen is that the government will absorb the increase in prices, which means a lot of subsidies will be provided, which means a huge burden on the exchequer. And let us just say that if the government is lucky, the crude oil prices will fall. And right now in January 2019, the first week is about to be over, it does seem like the prices may go down, simply because the overall economic conditions are depressed. So demand is not getting a boost right now. China is a huge consumer, but China's economy is not doing well. And the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, the oil cartel, has made certain attempts to boost the price, but has not succeeded. Also because there are other players which pump in more oil when the prices start going up. And the country which right now in a way controls the prices of crude oil is no, it's not Saudi Arabia, it's the United States. And that is the miracle of technology. Shale oil is a huge thing right now. And around 75, 76 US dollars, shale oil becomes profitable. So we can probably argue that the crude oil price ideally should be around 70, 74, 75, when both the traditional oil producers and the United States both can make money. So if that's the case, then it's all right. And again, just to talk about how the scenario has changed between 2014 and 2019, the prices were around half of the current levels when the government came in power, when Narendra Modi came in power. And crude oil prices have a phenomenal effect on the economy and therefore on the politics played out in the country. It's because of these prices, not entirely, but yes, because majorly because of crude oil prices, that we saw the Indian rupee in a free fall, breaking all records against the dollars. Not the way that we would have liked, but again, it's a good thing or a bad thing. Indian rupee fell by quite a lot in this year. Is it good or bad? We do not, we cannot say yes or no. It will depend on the positions that we have taken. For a company that gets billed in US dollars, there's nothing like it. I mean, you were supposed to get $100 into 60 was the multiple. Let's say 2 years ago, right now it would be $100 into 74, 75. At one point it was into 80. So that percentage, let's say around 25% is some extra money which you got for doing nothing. That's a windfall. Now, widening the current account deficit. So, what's a current account? Current account is, again, to put it very crudely, the amount of dollars owed by India to the rest of the world. All things settled, this is how much the country owes to the rest of the world as a percentage of the GDP. That's what you call the current account deficit. So, of course, if crude oil prices go up, the deficit will go up because the biggest component is crude oil prices. And then you have gold and equipment, the other categories, and this of course has a negative impact on the growth rate. Overall, the current account deficit matters because it also gives a signal to the foreign investors about the strength of the economy. And the other indicator is fiscal deficit. So, what's fiscal deficit? Simply overall, the government's expenditure minus the government's income. And it's now almost certain, because of this being an election year, that it will breach the government's own target of 3.3%. It's supposed to be 3.5%. Credit must be given to Arun Jaitley, the finance minister, for trying his best to stay true to his claim that fiscal deficit will not be compromised. But it's the beauty of all this is that this comes down to creative accounting as well, and not just the current government but the previous governments of India. What they inevitably do is, so you have subsidy bills, primarily fertilizer and food subsidies. They defer the payments to the next year, so the payment is not done because the payments have to be, the payments are managed by the banks. Who's the owner of the banks? The government is the owner of the public sector banks. So they have some agreement with the banks and the payment gets deferred to the next year. So that impact is not felt. And we see this happen a lot during the election year. So that overall the number seems all right, but the burden gets carried forward and forward. So the Comptroller and Auditor General of India currently has indicated that this in a way defeats the spirit of the FRBM Act, Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act, which imposes a limit of 3% on the fiscal deficit. That's something. So the thing is, the deficits are under pressure. Crude oil will call the shots. The rupee will see more pressure may see more pressure in the coming months. Let us say the biggest problem of India's economy right now is that the growth is jobless. So India is the fastest growing major economy of the world, but CMI, which is a respectable think tank, CMI recently said that India has lost 11 million jobs in 2018, and you have to read that again. It's not that India is creating jobs, India is losing jobs. So, who is responsible for this is up for debate. Politically, the message has to be kept simple, and especially more simple in the era of social media where people just forward without thinking. But uh, indeed, the government has gone wrong on certain counts. But overall, joblessness is not just a phenomenon in India but across the world. And one of the later topics that we will discuss, far right movement, is also a result of that. So what's going to happen inevitably is those who do not have appropriate skills, as technology improves, they will be consumed by those by technology. So productivity is increasing because of heavy use of machinery and technology. We do not need as many men per machine as we needed earlier. And now imagine artificial intelligence having its full impact. It's overhyped right now, but sooner or later we will find it making tangible difference to the production in even smaller factories. The scenario is going to be, it's scary where it will go to. So that is one. So where has India gone wrong? The country got over ambitious. The first thing to do right now is to create small factories as close to villages as possible. That has to be done because the other problem which I have not mentioned here is migration. Families are now getting separated. It's loneliness is what the word that comes to mind when you find one or two male members migrating to bigger cities just to work on construction sites. That is destroying families. So the first thing to do is to create factories very close to villages. And let us say Gandhi must be laughing from wherever he is, because he had always said that we have enough people in India. Why do we need technology? And he has been mocked for that. The point right now is we have enough people, but more importantly, we have so many people without, let's just say, any skill other than being able to work on a farmland. What do we do with those people? They have to be trained for close to let's say 2 months to work in a factory. The factory has to be nearby. That's the solution. And that call has to be taken right now on whether India wants this fancy notion of technologically advanced with 3 4 startups making the country proud, or employing people first and then seeing what can be done. So one takeaway is skilling of people. Skill India has now it has its aims are lofty. The government says 1 crore people were trained in the last year. It's also important to understand how they were trained, on what skills have they been trained upon, and whether they have appropriate jobs available for those skills. And this is something which the Niti Aayog has been talking about, the government think tank. But we will see. Now the thing is, Niti Aayog itself may not exist if the current government loses power. So that's something which politics inevitably does in India. And yeah, so this is a season of farm loan waivers. A hugely controversial topic. Should we waive off the farm loans? Farmers, of course, are as I was telling earlier. Farmers are not just poor; they will be getting poorer. There's a reason they are on the roads. Not all the farmers are politically motivated to hit the streets. Many of them are genuinely heartbroken. There are terrible tales of farmer suicides. So, what is the solution to this? The immediate solution, the populist solution, the one which appeals more to the people and the farmers, is waive off their farm loans, which means they do not have to pay the loans back, which is all right. Uh, Maybe you do that once. The bigger problem is that of moral hazard. Now, what's a moral hazard? Moral hazard simply means, let's say you take insurance for accident. You have accident. You are insured for accidents. Uh, Subconsciously, you know that. So there's nothing that stops you from indulging in slightly more risky behavior, because you know that anyway for that financial burden is not there. I'm taken care of. So that moral hazard is a problem in farm loan waivers. It means that as a farmer, I take the loan, and I then wait for the next election season, because I know anyway the government will waive off the loan. What it also does is It destroys the discipline in paying back loans. It in a way penalizes those who have paid off their loans. So imagine a farmer who has been very disciplined and has paid back all the loans and was happy till let's say a year ago, and now feels foolish for having done that. The next time is not going to pay back the loan. So, and this is inevitably this gets linked to the problem of bad loans. Who is going to bear the final burden? The banks, which also means you. So inevitably, this is about the economy. It's not just about the farmers or the agricultural part of the economy. This is about the overall all economy. I- so it's difficult to say no, don't do it, but the overall, let us say, the best answer to the question is there has to be a strategy to this. We cannot just go on from bouncing from one election that to one from one. Agriculture, by the way, is a state subject, so state governments can take a call up to a certain extent. So we cannot just go on bouncing from one election to the other election. The government should probably consider having a law as passed by the Parliament of India when it comes to farm loan waivers, the method for that, and the farmer should also be aware of it. And let us also be very clear that this does not solve the problem at all. This solves the symptom of a problem. The fundamental problem is agriculture in India is not profitable. It's not a business. So until the farmer becomes a businessman, this problem may not be solved, and that has to be looked into. So that is again an entire session. So there are many contentious issues right now. The first is RBI versus Government of India. It played out. It was bizarre because Urjit Patel was appointed by the current government, and when he took a stand against decreasing interest rates, the government used an exceptional clause in the RBI Act, which became unbearable for the governor. So he politely exited, and the current governor is again handpicked by the government. We will see what happens in the coming months, but credit must be given to the position of the governor of the Reserve Bank of India. The position is so exalted, and it does have some effect on the governors. Finally, they become apolitical and take the decisions in the interest of the economy. Understand one thing also very clearly: the government is not always wrong. So in this case, it can be argued that if the overall inflation rate in the last 30 months was around 3.9%, there was scope for reducing the interest rate. Now, if you reduce the interest rate, the economy gets a boost. So many parts of the sections of the economy would have been benefited by that. So that's something which is of significance. Non-performing assets still, it's not 10 lakh crore, but still 9 point. I think around 9 lakh crores are still bad loans. A huge blot on the banking sector. We have seen like the insolvent bankruptcy code has produced results, but the banks need to be stricter. More importantly, the owner of the biggest banks of India, which the one which controls 80% of the banking sector, which is the government of India, has to be very careful when it comes to using the resources of the banks for the welfare objectives. GST non-compliance, as I said, is concerned because it's increasing. Non-compliance is increasing. Right now, 30% of the businesses which are under the purview of GST are not filing the returns at the time when they are due. So that's again a factor of. And now what's going to happen again? Moral hazard is happening in the case of GST too. Now what the government does is when the businesses are in trouble, so small traders are in trouble, small businesses, a lot of hype around that, which is also true, not all of it, but the media starts talking about that. The government, what it does is it increases the limit. So up to 1.5 crore, you don't have to file a return. You don't have to file it as frequently as earlier. Now you make the limits more liberal. What it also does is it encourages businesses to not file the returns, and it in a way again makes those who have been very regular in spite of being small with GST filings and all feel foolish. So these are the issues which are ongoing in the economy of India. Again, let me say this is a very simplistic discussion on the economy. An academic discussion will take 3 to 4 hours, and the budget will be presented in February. It's going to be a very let's say important budget, primarily because it would because populism would be confronting the demands of economics. We'll see what happens then in our session after the budget. Right. So the other issue is inequality in India. It should have this something called trickle down theory in economics, which means something like the rising tide will lift all boats. So if the GDP is growing at a very good rate, overall the economy is growing, the size of the economy is growing. Sooner or later, all the parts of the economy will benefit. The benefits should trickle down to the lowest level. That is not happening in India. In any case, that trickle down theory has always been controversial, but that is not happening. So what is happening in India is the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So the ugly part of the economy is the extent of inequality in the country. Now, one depressing statistic which always comes up in any discussion to show that India's economy may be growing but the people are not is actually, no, literally people are not growing. So India accounts for 31% of world's stunted children, which means the height is not appropriate for their age, height and weight. India accounts for the maximum percentage of stunted and malnourished children. So the economy is growing but the people are not. And this is an indicator of the failure of trickle down theory, but it's also got to do with dietary habits. But that we will probably not be looking at right now. And now, certain statistics, again, you have to quote numbers if you have to impress people, and hopefully correct numbers. So this is the correct number here. The top 10% of India's population, they control 55% of total wealth. When you arrange them in the descending order of wealth, the top 10% actually control 55%. Bottom 50% control just 15.3%. This itself tells you about this inequality right now. But remember, this was just 31% in 1980, which means India has become more unequal right now. And the most striking statistic is the wealth of the top 1% has been increasing since 1980s, but the bottom 50% has been sliding. Which means what? Which means the rich have been getting richer at the cost of the poor. And this cannot go on forever. This means that the so-called India is a welfare state. So India, the preamble says, it was amended, of course, and the word socialist was inserted there. This does not feel like it's anywhere close to socialism. Now, how do people do well? People will do well. Now, if a country is truly socialist, there will be interventions in health, education, and income. These three are mandatory, and these three, by the way, are measured by the Human Development Index. But on all the three counts, India has been an underperformer, even by the standards of a developing country. And the most depressing statistic on this count is that of healthcare. So India's public health expenditure is just 1.02% of the GDP, which is, even for the low income countries, the average is 1.4% of the GDP. The other fact, of course, is that 3/4 of health expenditure goes to the private sector, because there is no public sector as such. It hardly exists. Which means what? Who bears the burden of this? The poor people. Now they will have to shell out of the pocket expenditure is huge and unnecessarily so. So why is it that, knowing very well that this has to be probably the first requirement of the welfare state, the governments over so many years have not been able to do this? It's simply because it does not lead to immediate results. You cannot show it to your vote bank in the next year that, hey, I increased it by increased from 1% to 2%, and therefore this great thing happened. It does not happen like that. So I would say one side effect of democracy is being carried away by the initiatives that result in short-term improvements rather than something which should be the backbone of the economy. Without proper public health expenditure, no country can really grow, because you are adding the number of sick people in the economy. And not just sick people, there are also people who will be in debt. They will borrow for to take care of their health, and that means a lifetime uh, wasted, just trying to cover up for their loss during their sickness period. And now, interestingly, India says it will spend 5% of its GDP by 2025, according to the national health policy. It does not seem to be happening. It will not happen at all, because to go from 1% to 5% simply means the country will have to sacrifice on certain other counts. Even in education, though India has improved the allocation, it is still not 6%, which is the ideal 6%, which is the ideal for a country to do well. Still not there. So if you increase the percentage here, if you increase the percentage on education, it has to come from somewhere. The best way to do this is to grow the pie overall, so that the economy should do really well, but this incremental improvement has to happen. India has to move towards 5%. There again, I would say this should have been taken care of by a law, by something which the government cannot ignore over the years. Has not happened. And so what happens is, this is a very interesting statistic. Indians work for just 6.5 years at peak productivity, compared to 20 years in China, 16 in Brazil, and 13 in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, by the way, is an outstanding performer when it comes to development indicators. And so that's a problem. This shows what we are doing with our demographic. We have so many young people, but 6.5 years are spent at peak productivity. Not all of them have spent 2 years preparing for MBA and 2 years during MBA, which you will do. So you are going to probably lose 4 years overall. And we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is that this is a young population not employed, most likely not employed in a productive job, or probably sick and unable to work at peak productivity, or working in farms where there's hardly any requirement. So something what is called a disguised employment, which means you're not needed for the job, but you're still there because there's nothing else to do. And so no wonder India ranks 158th out of 195 countries in an international ranking which is published by the reputed medical journal The Lancet. Is 158th out of 195 countries when it comes to human capital. So the quality of our human capital is abysmally low. As in, this indicates what? This indicates the future is bleak. We have a lot of people, what we call as the demographic dividend. We have a lot of young people, 50% of our population below the age of 35, but they are not cut out for contributing productively to the economy. And that means, in a way, the youth will also be a burden on the economy. Otherwise, it's infants and those who are above 65. So it's something which has to be, it should have sent alarm bells ringing by now, but in India it's 5 years. The next government will take care probably, is something which always comes up. Right? So overall, it's no surprise that India ranks 130 out of 189 countries on the Human Development Index, the latest one, which is the most widely accepted indicator of overall development in the country. India is in the middle zone, but only barely so. So Sri Lanka is ranked at 76, even above China, which is at 86. So yes, it can be done. The focus has to be there on healthcare, education, and income support, which India has failed to do, because frankly there is no consensus. Because after every 5 years, or even earlier, an election has to be fought. That leads to a lot of disruption, unnecessary disruption in the economy. Right, so 2019, the election season, Rahulji, Modiji, and all the other Gs are now in action. All the promises made on either side. Judgment day for the current government. That is all right. And depending on your political stand, you can forward the WhatsApp messages to your groups. But let's be practical and think about what should be the ideal answer if you have that, like I said, a trap question. Who are you going to vote for this year? And you do not know whether the panel supports, the panel is on which side. You just have no idea about it. You don't want to offend sentiments. So the trick is to not fall for that kind of a discussion. I would say the best way to to do things to is with one throw of your dice is to take it in the direction of the economy. And Donald Trump does it very well. The question is something else, and he gives a very good answer to some other question. So you have to be like that. You have to take it to the direction of the economy and how politics and economy are interrelated, and they should not be. So first of all, now let's see what's going on here. Uh, Indians are less satisfied with their current lives right now than they were in 2014. So a Gallup survey says most Indians rate their lifestyle at 4 out of 10. Uh, it was 4.4 back in 2014 when the current government came in power. Uh, Now, this is a matter of perception. It can be argued it's a matter of perception. It also probably can be argued that it has to be seen what was the sample group of the survey. But it's actually not surprising that people are less satisfied. Why? Because people are increasingly getting exposed to more and more options. They get to see what's happening around the world. Um, and after the Reliance Jio phenomenon, most people have access to the more people right now have access to the internet, and they are aware of what more they can get, right? So people will be increasingly dissatisfied because they know how much better their life could have been rather than how much it has improved from the previous year. That can be argued. If we do not know how the government has performed, and so dissatisfaction is something which has become intertwined with our current lives. We are not satisfied, right? You are not satisfied. First of all, if you are satisfied, you wouldn't be appearing for these interviews. You are aware of more opportunities that you probably you cannot capture right now, so you want to do something and then be eligible for that. 3 decades ago, you would have been happily chasing one government job and planning to retire from there. That doesn't happen anymore. So the other part is more strong economic. So just having strong economic growth is not enough for the government, for any government right now, because people have to finally see what is in it for them. So that's something. Now, universal basic income made a lot of noise. That in India, probably there was a discussion paper floated in one of the economic surveys. It was mentioned that probably India can explore universal basic income, which means everybody gets a fixed amount of money, at least that much basic money. Even if you don't do anything, you I think the figure being quoted around that time was 13,500. You anyway get in your account. A hugely debatable topic and very strong points on either side. One thing it would have immediately done is it would have given a boost to the entire economy because so many people with so much money to spend. The other thing would have been that inflation would have gotten high, and in any case, when everybody has so much more money, prices will rise to absorb that much money. So let's say if that would have happened, what a huge spectacle it would have created, and what profound disruption it would have done. And so people want that kind of a disruption. Not only are you supposed to be, so rather than doing 100 small things, do one big thing. So and let people know about it. Otherwise, the perception is difficult right now to meet. Now the opposition, yes. So the current government, the BJP, is now facing the heat because the last time they had it easy. They just had to make promises like all opposition parties do. They make promises and they had to attack the current government. So now they're facing the same music. They cannot make mere promises because they are the government right now. So the biggest threat right now is that it will lead to a splurge, which you will see in the budget, and not just some spending, some more spending spread across many projects or schemes, it would be one or two big schemes which are launched, because the government has been pushed to a corner of late. And this is one this is a fundamental problem that I have with this whole democratic setup of 5 years. What usually happens is when the government change, the first year goes in undoing what the previous government had done. The last year goes in preparing for the next election. So effectively, you have just 3 years, uh, and what do you do in those 3 years if you can't plan for? So the advantage that China right now has, however much you criticize that President Xi Jinping is a dictator, he is there for life, is that there is clarity, there is a vision. So 2025 Make in China project is on artificial intelligence and high tech uh, driven growth, and they know that it will not be disrupted. Of course, Donald Trump is now destroying that plan by putting massive restrictions on Chinese companies borrowing or stealing, as he says, technology from the US. But there is complete clarity of vision. There is a strong leader. Everything revolves around the vision, whatever be the vision. That is the luxury that democracy does not accord. So India is the most vibrant democracy, but the policies get hostage. They are held hostage to the whims and fancies of the governments in charge. So that is one point which is there. Of course, I'm not saying that we are just discussing what's going on. I'm not saying you just say I have a fundamental problem with democracy and I would hope a dictator rises and India does really well. That's not the answer I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is uh, you have to talk about how the economy will suffer during these months. The government will overspend. The next government, whichever party comes to power, will have to pay the bill for that. The deficit will go crashing. uh, there will be no long there is nothing long term in an election year, so there's no long term clarity. So what is going to happen is short term initiatives, and India will end up losing a year on that. So that is your answer, and you have to say this in a political manner. If somebody is just, how things get heated up when you talk about politics. It does not have to be that. Now, I've noted this. Arun Shourie had made this famous statement: the BJP is just a Congress plus cow, which simply meant that the same policies renamed, rebranded, along with some elements of communalism. That is the BJP. The point is that right now the BJP is the same as the Congress. So farm loan waiver, yes, farm loan waiver, and we saw that in Sabarimala too. We are seeing that in Sabarimala, the Sabarimala issue in Kerala. Right now, the BJP is, of course, against the Supreme Court verdict allowing women to enter Sabarimala. One would expect the Congress to oppose the BJP on this, but they are not, because you do not want to be seen as opposing the majority view, the view of the majority community in an election year. Otherwise, you can do that. So what this does is there is no ideology overall. The Everything comes around winning the elections, and so that's the answer. That I'm scared for the economy. I am I want a semblance of continuity when it comes to politics. For example, insolvency code must continue, must be improved. It has worked, and one good instance was Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, MGNREGA, which the Congress government had launched, and the current government, BJP in opposition had criticized, but then when it came to power, it realized that is something which is hugely important in the villages and cannot be tampered with. The allocation remained more or less the same, but the scheme was continued. So that much, and this is called bipartisanship. The two parties, the two leading parties, have to agree on certain issues that are or policies that are non-negotiable, that are not tamperable. For example, in the Constitution of India, the Keshwanand Bharati verdict, in that Keshwanand Bharati verdict, the Supreme Court said, and that's the most landmark judgment ever. The Supreme Court said that these are the parts of basic structure of the constitution. Certain aspects cannot be compromised. So freedom of religion, equality, and there are many other. Of course, it's debatable what actually comprises the basic structure, but there are certain core elements which cannot be compromised. In the same manner, I think overall, this time for the country to agree on certain issues and laws, and that they will continue beyond all that. That is probably my answer to which party I want to win. I want the policies that have worked to continue, that have not worked to be discontinued, and that can work to be improved. And that's my hope from the election season. So India needs to go beyond partition politics. That whatever this party says, I'm against it, and even though it makes sense for the economy, that should not happen. And that's what probably we would want the government or any party that comes to power the next to do. Right, so India is not a promising land right now, it's a land of promises. There's a difference between the two terms. That's our election season. Now, important for you is, which we will do during our course, is analyzing the 5 years, close to 5 years of the current NDA, BJP led NDA government, which means looking at the major reforms, hits and misses, and the major issues of the current era. Class versus caste is a huge thing. So if you follow Indian politics, it's moving from caste towards class, which means, let's say 20 years from now, it will not be I am from this caste, this person is from the other caste. It will be I am rich or I am poor. And you see, all the parties try to show themselves as pro-poor. There will be, of course, one big party which will be seen clearly as pro-poor, and that, of course, will determine on their. Unfortunately, the manifestos are not widely read by the people, and these days there is this habit which goes unpunished of withholding the manifesto till even a week before the elections. Sectarian politics, which means the role of religion in politics. Is it that India would now look beyond that? That's a huge topic of debate. And what data do we have to substantiate this? Will come up. Fiscal federalism, if you are not aware of this term, it's all right, because this term became huge and it was buzzing in the first year after the current government came to power. The current government came to power because they said we are going to empower the state governments. They will not have to come to us with a begging ball every time they need certain things. We are going to not decide how much help can we provide to the state government depending on whether they are from our party or from some other party. But that has not worked out in the next years. After 2000, let's say 14-15, we haven't seen much of this happen. One good example of fiscal federalism probably is GST. A lot of noise, a lot of drama, a lot of fights, but overall it was agreed upon. And the GST council, even though dominated by the current government, primarily because it's also empowering most of the states of India, but the GST council is a good example of fiscal federalism. Beyond that, we haven't seen much happen here. The other buzzword, the phrase which became popular, was that minimum government, maximum governance, which the BJP government had promised. Not much has happened about that, because that would mean reducing the role of the government in as many aspects of the economy and polity as possible, but not much has happened on that front. So all these need to be analyzed so that we have a very clear report card of the government there, which we will do that in our sessions. And now, before we come to the next topic, it's very fascinating. I really like this, based on data, but of course arguable data. So what's this Dunning-Kruger effect? If you look at the chart, it's on the y-axis you have confidence, on the x-axis you have experience. As you can clearly see, this curve there, what it shows is if you lack in experience, which also means knowledge, your confidence is much greater. Let us say this, it's simply a graphical representation of ignorance is bliss. So if I do not know how much more the other people know and how much more there is to know, I would probably assume I know a lot, because I do not just know what more needs to be done. So I am very confident. The more I know, I would, like Socrates had said, all I know is that I don't know. He read so much, he wrote so much, he read so much, probably the most knowledgeable man of his time around 400 BC in Athens, that he finally concluded, I actually do not know anything. So that happens when you know a lot. So you would say, no, I am not good. Now, why are we talking about Dunning-Kruger effect? It was published in a paper backed by data. So they had reasonable data to show. Because the person coming on the screen right now is, is somebody who has proved this. Correct. Right? Donald Trump is the embodiment of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Because there's one thing which he does not lack, is that's confidence. He can talk about issues, policies, everything, and he would just conclude that he knows. So, uh, what has this done is, it has made everything, uh, being chopped. It has chopped down everything to the bare minimum. We just don't know, don't want to know, because that does not work there, and that's something which is, let us say, bad. And so what has Trump done through his victory in 2016, unbelievable victory in 2016, and by still remaining strong as a candidate to win in 2020, is, people think now it's possible to disrupt the entire political establishment, by being as anti-establishment as possible. So anti-establishment became a thing. Nationalism became a thing. Is America First was buzzing everywhere. A lot of analysis has been done on how did America got themselves Donald Trump. One aspect is that a silent majority, which is the white male, a white conservative male, who were not talking openly against what was going on in the society, immigration and everything. They liked what he was saying, and they did not support him openly, but they voted for him eventually. They were coming to his rallies and they voted for him eventually. So he began the trend of, it's difficult to say Trump is far right or Trump is this or that. The only thing in support of, which can describe Trump, is that Trump is Trump, unlike any other politician. But he has been a template which has worked. In Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro just copied him and did better than him in a way. He outdid him. And so what Bolsonaro says is, it's all right to destroy Amazon forests and make it agricultural land, because that's what people need. So we're living in the era of Donald Trump, and it seems like 2000 we will live in this era till 2024. Now, what is Trump doing to the world economy is probably of greater interest to us than what he's doing to the politics. What he's doing is so Donald Trump does not believe in global trade treaties. He does not believe in the World Trade Organization. What he thinks is every treaty can be renegotiated. And since the United States is the biggest economy, the strongest economy, the countries which negotiate with America have more to lose than America. So he can always throw tantrums and disrupt treaties. NAFTA has been renegotiated now, and that's actually a big win for Trump, because he got favorable deals for more favorable terms for the United States. Though his critics say that it's actually the same thing. It's NAFTA by any other name. Now we are seeing what he is doing to China. A huge trade war is going on. China is now facing an existential crisis. They are the number 2 economy of the world, but they're majorly dependent on the United States as their buyer, as the buyer of what they produce. And with Trump imposing massive tariffs on Chinese goods, and their economy has started to struggle. It's very interesting, China and the US, because a communist country which is
dependent on a capitalist country. Can't the two are as poles apart as any two countries can be. They were on good terms recently, but Donald Trump has decided to test the patience, and let us say he's winning the trade war right now simply because he's the boss of the biggest economy of the world. So there are certain terms which there are certain developments when since Trump came to power. Anti-immigrant is let's say the mantra which has helped random parties come to power. Just be anti-immigrant. In Europe, for example, in 2005 15, immigration was an issue. Right now, it's not even 20% of what it was in 2015. Still, who's the villain for most of these countries? The immigrant. And there are countries where there are hardly 10,000 immigrants, yet there are leading parties talking against them. So you need a villain, right? So Adolf Hitler taught us a long time back. People want a villain. They want a hero, but they also want a villain. So who's the villain? The villain is the immigrant, and I'm the hero. So therefore, people will vote for me. It's much easier to understand who I hate rather than who I really like. So therefore, that message works. So America first is the message that he has given. Let us say one thing in his favor, which is that he has been doing what he had threatened he would do, what he had promised he would do, and others were claiming he would not do, but he has been doing it. Right now, we know what he's doing. He's trying to build that wall against Mexico, which is laughable. As in, why would you need a wall against a country which is not a threat? Of course, there are issues related to crimes and drugs, nothing that cannot be solved, and nothing of a magnitude that should encourage him to hold the entire government hostage till this thing is done. But he is doing it for a simple reason. His voters will like it that he did what he promised he would do. As simple as that. Right, so, but Trump is the destroyer of liberal trade order. Most of the global trade treaties, we'll analyze them in our sessions, but they have been split into smithereens by Donald Trump. And anti-mainstream media, what he calls mainstream media, what he calls as fake news, and that is a thing because of Donald Trump. The point is that he is the result of a lot of that, and he's his own media right now with his tweets. He's the president who decides policies over tweets. So that's a good thing or bad thing. Now you can say it's hyper democratic. He doesn't need anybody. He's directly contacting, talking to the people. But it can be argued otherwise too. Now it's good for the economy. One thing is there that the economy is doing really well, and in the US primarily, if the economy is doing well, the presidents get re-elected. Simple as that, because the jobs, he has also done well on jobs, which makes sense because he took up one step which has worked really well for the country. In the short term, in the long run, there will be adverse effects, which is provide huge tax cuts for repatriating money from other countries back to the United States, because the tax rates, companies such as Apple were parking their money. For example, Apple was parking a lot of money money in Ireland and other countries which are tax havens. Donald Trump provided a one-time tax rebate for the companies which bring the money back, and even overall tax rates were slashed. And the bet was that because of this, the companies will increase production, increase the number of jobs, which seems to have happened, though again it's too early to tell. And Donald Trump is still going strong for 2020. There is no anti-Trump right now. Right, so Trump, what he's doing is he's making America great again, and in that process, the world is seeing the most bizarre experiment ever. And understand that we are talking about a $19 trillion economy running on the whims of one person. Every country which is integrated with the world economy depends on the United States in some way, and so that's thing. The worst thing is there is no certainty of what would be his next move. So he's withdrawing troops from Syria, but again that's somewhat on hold. In one tweet, he can actually say that no, we will not withdraw from Syria, and he gets away with that because it's expected. So Donald Trump is expected to change his mind. He is expected to be fickle, and that's what is happening. Nobody could have imagined that any politician can get away with something. So he's somebody who contradicts himself in 2-3 sentences itself, right? So he says, maybe I'm winning, maybe I'm not winning. It's all right. We are doing great stuff. That's the sort of thing, and people like it. So maybe we need that to happen in India too. So 29th March 2019, you do not need to reserve your seats. The British people are anxiously waiting to know what's going to happen after this. And of course, not just the British people, but every country which has trade ties, every company which is present in Britain is interested in knowing right now what's going to happen after this, because 29th March 2019 is when is the deadline for the UK to exit the European Union after, and that's the conclusion of the Brexit vote that happened in 2016. Now, Brexit as a phenomenon preceded Trump in a way, and I remember reading many editorials at that time. Most of them were saying, if this can happen, then Trump can also happen, and it happened. It was unbelievable that they would land their country in a mess. There was never any clarity on what's going to be the future with the outside the European Union. So here we are. Again, an entire session can be spent on this. Certain terms are important. Article 50 is what we keep on hearing. Article 50 comes from the Lisbon Treaty. Basically, this gives legal validity to the negotiation between the European Union and the United Kingdom. The European Union, what it has successfully done is it has given this signal to all the other member countries: if you are going to dare to vote to exit the European Union, understand your life will be very difficult. So the Prime Minister Theresa May is the most pitiable world leader right now, because she's pleading inside her country, she's pleading outside her country. Even if she negotiates a good deal with the European Union by March 29th, she believes she already has. Another year will be spent in negotiating more deals with the other countries, including India. But this is something that could have been avoided. The loss to the UK economy, even in the best case, will run into more than £100 billion. So now, what is hard Brexit? Hard Brexit simply means Brexit, which means the UK will exit the European Union as a political body, and also the customs union, as well as the single entity as a trading bloc will have nothing to do with it. So that's called hard Brexit. So most of the ardent supporters of Brexit would say, no, we want hard Brexit. So vis-a-vis soft Brexit, which means yes, politically they will be separate, but they will still be a part of the customs union, and they will benefit from the trade deals that the EU negotiates. That would mean a lot of certainty for those companies and individuals who are doing business in the UK. But this is something which the Brexit supporters will probably revolt against, because they say this is simply the status quo. You're calling it Brexit, but it is not. Unless you exit the single entity, the trade body, the customs union, we do not call it a Brexit. Now, no deal Brexit is the worst fear. No deal Brexit means the talks break down, nothing happens, there is no certainty of how the EU will respond, what will be the relation between the two, and Brexit happens. And that is a nightmare scenario, primarily because the UK economy will go crashing. There will be so much uncertainty that most businesses will exit, the country's rating will be slashed, and these things will happen, and they will pay for the unforgivable sin of enslaving half of the world. In some ways, this is like karma theory at work. You just have to. If you have been following what's going on in the United Kingdom in the last 2 years, you just can smile at that. The most unproductive development ever to have happened to any leading country of the world, I think Brexit will rank right up there. Second referendum is the most, probably it will be a fitting climax to Brexit, and it's gaining ground, it's gaining more popular support. It means that the people at that time were not even aware of what they were voting for when they said they are voting for Brexit. The vote was not one-sided. It was actually close. So now they are more aware. Let them have another chance of deciding on whether or not they want Brexit. At this moment, if it is done, most polls, opinion polls suggest that the people will actually choose to remain in the EU. But this will be politically disastrous for either party, the Conservatives and as well as the Labour, if they are seen as supporting second referendum, and the Labour and the Conservative Party, a big chunk of that actually would want the second referendum to happen. So that would be a good climax to the story and provide a way out to the United Kingdom of this entire mess. And we will see a lot of interesting politicians out there, 2-3 of them trying to be the next Donald Trump and become the Prime Minister of Britain. We'll see. And Theresa May, by the way, is a role model in resilience. She has survived so many backstabbing attempts, so many rounds of humiliation, but she did not resign because she is strong, and she has said that she will not contest in the next elections. It remains to be seen if she remains in power in the next 3 months or so. We'll see. So Brexit is happening right now, and it will continue in the next 3 months. So what you see on the screen are leaders who were hardly important. Nobody would have even heard, not many people would have heard of them outside their own countries. Even in their own countries, they were not so popular. But now they are either in the government or are expected to form the government. For example, take Marine Le Pen. She is the far right leader of France. She lost to the current president of France, Emmanuel Macron, and in the second round. But now, if the elections are held right now, she would be a clear winner. France, by the way, is undergoing a very interesting political experiment. The Yellow Vest movements, every Saturday they protest against President Macron, and their grudge is very straightforward, that he is the president of the rich. They are unhappy with tax incentives being given to the rich, not much being done. The perception is so strong that whatever Macron does, he's seen as arrogant and somebody who should go. So we will see who takes advantage of that fluidity of politics in France. But there are so many in Viktor Orban in Hungary is as extreme as it gets, as right as it gets. So in the Netherlands, you have a very strong far right leader. In Brazil, you have now the world right now is seeing itself shift to the right because the people are angry, and you can have many ways to explain this, but fundamentally this is about the people being left out of, let's say, the spoils of economic development, and they are angry, and they like people who leaders who are as angry as they are, and promise to do things which will have revenge on the establishment. That's a trend there, and that is going to understand. So in India, when we say far right, for example, we say the BJP is far right because it's Hindutva, right wing, and all that. That's not ideally what we mean by far right. Far right simply means anti-establishment. So we haven't in India, we haven't seen an anti-establishment, a truly anti-establishment party. The only party which had that chance was the IIM-A party, which lost the plot somehow. There's a huge vacuum there, and we will see the rise of another, probably a young party with a radical message coming up and exploiting the inequality, that the opportunity. And it sounds very I would say crude, but the extent of inequality in India right now has created a political opportunity which has not been capitalized there by any party. Ideally speaking, the left party should take that cause up, but the left is hardly anything has remained of the left. So that's your far right. Again, a detailed discussion will require more time. So fake news is upon us. It's just everywhere. Nowadays you will find the government giving prime time ads on even the FM radio and the television, that be aware of what you are forwarding. Just do not blindly forward, because that may lead to unnecessary developments. People get carried away. Verify. It's extremely difficult to control this phenomenon of fake news in the age of social media, because every person is a media company right now. We are in that age. I am a media company, because I have friends on Facebook, I have people on WhatsApp, I am in 10 groups. I can simply forward that. All I need is 3 more people to forward that to the other people, and it creates a chain. Now, why does fake news spread? As in, why would people believe that Hillary Clinton is an alien? And that became a very well circulated fake news before the US elections. Because first of all, it's interesting. It creates an impact which genuine news won't. So, if for example, if I say one person burnt himself, immolated himself, put himself on fire on the street right now in a metropolitan city somewhere there, it will create a much larger impact than saying that 16,000 farmers committed suicide last year, because that spark is not there. Suddenly that image being created is not there. So inherently, and the first one might have been fake news, but you are going to circulate that because unemployment this happened. So what happens is, with fake news, it travels much faster. Like Churchill had told that a lie travels around the world before the truth has the chance to even put the pants on. That's true. The fake news is more interesting. It travels faster and broader. It appeals to the average mind. It's interesting. It even makes you smile. You don't need to actually verify that. You smiled at it. You were angry at it. It evokes extreme emotions in you, and therefore you will forward that inherently. It spreads there, and the bigger problem is the mainstream media also falling prey to this. There are, of course, many news agencies which dispense fake news on a regular basis. They're known for that, and they have a huge following, because they appeal to a certain kind of taste. So if I know you like a certain kind of news and I give you more of that, you will like me more. You will promote me more. So the implications are huge. They are lethal. Of course, we have seen lives being lost in India and across the world over fake news. It's a huge problem in Myanmar, where Facebook became a tool where propaganda was done against the Rohingya minorities. Fake photographs were circulated. It also helped Bolsonaro win the elections in Brazil. Of course, with some alleged assistance of Vladimir Putin, it helped Trump win the elections to some extent. Allegedly, again, we do not know. So the whole thing is, how do we know what we are reading is true? And that's the problem. So how do you solve this is the thing. Now let's say we have to be technical about this. How do you solve this problem? I was in discussion with some, let's say, a big tech company, and they said, can you suggest how to solve the problem of fake news, because then we will have some tie-up and we'll do that. We like what you do. But the point is that it is not possible to concretely identify all the news that is circulated every day as fake or genuine. It will take it will take a day or so to identify that. You cannot stop people from forwarding as soon as they read the headline. It's just natural, and the image creates a far greater impact than the text. So people see the image and they forward there. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, they all will inevitably catch up with this, but right now it's just not there. I'm not aware of, if there was any other tool, then Facebook would not have hired 20,000 people to manually verify whether the news is fake or not. They do it manually after so much controversy about that. So that's fake news, and a huge topic for discussion. The technical tools available right now. How would you tackle the problem of fake news? For example, if I ask you in an interview, how would you tackle the problem of fake news? You cannot say it. It cannot be done. So the ideal answer is it has to be through human as well as automated intervention. Both have to be clubbed together. What we can immediately do is block news before it's verified. So people get it deferred. They get it delayed. It is all right. So that risk will have to be borne by the media companies, that unless it's verified, which will take some time, take an hour before it gets verified as genuine, then major at least news stories get blocked till it's done. And again, that may not work because not everybody would be willing to abide by that. What we call the media is a very loosely thrown around term. So today everybody is a media company. That's the thing, right? And so yeah, so that's, I think, more or less about the themes which I thought you should follow in your, and follow and analyze, and of course be very well prepared with your facts and figures during the interview. So that's about that. And like I said, we have this module, the key module, which is into 2. The standard course is there already are 60 hours of classes there, and there are live sessions which I will be taking in the coming days. So overall 105 hours of classes, and it will cover all the basics of let us say it's your MBA before your MBA, and it's not so much bombarding of current events and dates and figures as it is about analysis of issues that matter, as interesting as I probably can make. And that's your standard course. The premium course, I said it the last year, it's simply meant to discourage you from having me as your on-call mentor, because I cannot do that for a lot of people. I do my best, by the way. Yashaswi at Knappily.com. You can write to me. I'll probably reply with some delay, or maybe if I have time at that moment itself. But beyond that, to be able to guide that, I cannot take a lot of people on board. Usually it would be around 8 to 10, and very limited seats. So if you are interested in me guiding you, and again, like I said, I'm not Trump, so I cannot say that I'm the best here. So I'm reasonably good at that. So premium courses for that. Standard course takes you to the other side. What we are going to do is we are going to take you to the other side, convert your best call, leave you to your B school, and probably also help you understand what you want in those 2 years. And beyond that, like I said, the second objective is, which all of us can take right now, is to make America great again. After that, we'll focus on that. We'll definitely make America. If Trump can make America great again, we will do it too. First, get done with your MBA, and then we'll go there. All right, thank you. We'll see you, hopefully see you more often now.